You're on ThursdAI, March 14th, 2024, aka Pi Day, aka ThursdAI BirthdAI. I'm sorry for the pun. I promise I'm gonna keep it contained as much as I can. My name is Alex Volkov. I'm an AI evangelist with Weights and Biases. Today on the show, a birthday celebration for ThursdAI Twitter Spaces. That's right. I started recording these exactly a year ago on GPT4's announcement day, March 14th, 2023. In addition, everything important that happened in the world of AI for the past week that sometimes feels like a year, including open source LLMs, big companies and their APIs, hardware and robotics for the first time, agents, and more. We've talked about a lot of stuff. But first, as always, a recap of everything we discussed as I recorded it at the end of the show while everything was fresh in my mind after this little birthday song that AI created for us.
On a Thursday morning, Alex and his crew gather round to share the AI news. ThursdAI, the name of the game, keeping folks informed, that's their aim. ThursdAI, 1 year strong, Alex and his friends, they carry on, teaching about AI, we got the week, from open source to big tech C. Experts join the stage, share their insights. From vision to agents, they shine so bright. Empowering databases and research teams. ThursdAI covers it all. GPT4 to Claude's debut. ThursdAI's been there, seeing it through. A year of growth, a community thrives, engaging, learning as AI strives. ThursdAI, 1 year strong, Alex and his friends, they carry on, teaching about AI, we got the week, from open source to big tech C. ThursdAI, here to stay, guiding us through the AI way, as the journey continues.
Can you believe that this is AI generated? Maybe at the end there, it went a little bit off, but holy cow. I re-listened to this birthday celebration multiple times after I created it with Suno V3 Alpha. So get ready for AI music everywhere. And now, the recap of everything we talked about for this week. But definitely stick around and listen to the end of the show. And as always, you will have chapters on every podcast platform that you use, especially Apple Podcasts. And if you do use Apple Podcasts, why not give us a thumbs up and like a 5-star review? That really helps. That's how people discover us, believe it or not. Here's a recap of everything we talked about. And following that, a beautiful in-depth conversation with many folks who shared this journey with me and been in one way or another the reason I kept going this year for ThursdAI. Everyone, here's a recap of everything we've talked about on ThursdAI's anniversary for Twitter Spaces, March 14th, 2024, which is also Pi Day, which is also the anniversary of ChatGPT4 and anniversary of Claude 1. And we spoke about ThursdAI history. We spoke about how we got here, how now it's a podcast. And in open source, we had TogetherAI release something called speculative decoding Sequoia. Speculative decoding is not new, but their approach to speculative decoding called Sequoia is new. It is able to optimize inference for something like a Llama 70 billion parameter on consumer hardware up to 8 to 9% faster by just predicting a tree of next tokens and letting the model select between them. Speculative decoding is an additive technique to improve speed of inference of models. On top of models getting smaller and better, the bigger models are going to get faster on local hardware as well due to something like speculative decoding. It's very exciting to see. TogetherAI also announced like an extension of the round, and now they're a unicorn and definitely doing incredible things. We also, in the open source, we've covered that our friends at News Research, Hermes Pro. If you followed us at any point before, you know that Hermes is one of the top fine tunes for Mistral 7 billion parameters. They released a pro version of Mistral 7 billion on top of Hermes dataset. Hermes dataset also, by the way, is open and you can go and download and use it. This version, the Pro version, is specifically focused on tool use and function calling. And we also covered what tool use is from a perspective of developers who build RAG apps, for example, or need structured output. This new version supports JSON mode and JSON output, which is a very welcome addition to the world of open source. It has OpenAI endpoint compatibility, and it's hosted on Fireworks, so you can actually try it out and just swap the OpenAI endpoint with that endpoint and see if your tasks are working with Hermes as well. On the border between open source LLMs and big company LLMs, we then moved to a conversation about Cohere. Cohere is a company that was co-founded by one of the authors of the original Transformers paper, Aidan Gomez, and some other folks. Incredible company, mostly focused on enterprise and use cases around RAG, retrieval augmented generation. Cohere had a bunch of models called re-ranker and embedding models, and now they released something called Command R. And by release, I mean they released it via API, but also they dropped it on Hugging Face in open weights, non-commercial license. So you'd be able to actually run and use this locally, but you cannot use it commercially yet. For that, they offer their API, and their API is definitely there. It performs very well on RAG application, outperforms other scalable models. So outperforms like even Mixtral and Llama.cpp. They're not comparing themselves to GPT-4 because this model, the Command R model, is definitely focused on enterprise and use cases. It works very well with their Cohere embedding and re-rank models in tandem as well. It's focused on tool use. Like previously we said, the Technium just added to open source. They're focused on tool use and external tools as well. And their Cohere API has a bunch of external tools that you can plug in into this one, like web search, like stock prices, like a bunch of other things. Optimized for 10 major languages, which is usually way more than other open models, and trained on 13 more, and has 128K context window. And in the same area of smaller models, we finally got the small model answer from Anthropic, the folks that just released Claude 3. Claude 3, Anthropic released the smallest, most performant version of Claude 3 called Haiku. They call it the fastest, most affordable yet model for enterprise applications. Claude 3 Haiku is 25 cents per million input tokens, where GPT 3.5, which is considered the cheapest one and the most performant one so far, is half $1 for a million tokens. So it's half the price of GPT 3.5. However, it significantly overperforms GPT 3.5 on every metric that they've added, including human eval, which is 75% versus GPT 3.5's 48%. MMLU score is 75. And the kicker here is as 200K context window, like the major Claude Opus and Claude Sonnet. So Haiku has 200K context window. Imagine a model that is only 25 cents per million tokens on input has also 200K context window. And it's available via the API, obviously, or Amazon and Google Cloud as well. And it's vision enabled, so you can actually send images. And we've geeked out about how a year ago when we started ThursdAI, one of the reasons why we came into the space, because we were blown away by GPT-4's vision capabilities. And now we're getting, I'm not going to say that Haiku is anywhere close to GPT-4 vision-wise, but it's, from what I've tested, very decent. Given the price point, it's incredibly decent. Then I covered that in the weights and biases area, we're coming to San Francisco in April 18th. It's our fully connected conference with many big clients of ours coming, foundational model creators, etc., coming to speak on the stage. And we're also going to do a workshop a day before, so April 17th. If you're interested in this, please write to me, DM me, and I'll definitely tell you when that's up. The tickets are early bird, and you're more than welcome to join us in San Francisco. We will be very happy to see you. If you came from ThursdAI, come and give me a high five. I would love to show my boss that this is actually pulling some folks. But also we covered continued things in ThursdAI around vision and video. So skipping from weights and biases stuff, we covered vision and video. We covered the DeepSeek, released a DeepSeek VLM, which is a tiny vision model. So again, in the realm of multimodality this year, we're now getting 1.3 billion parameter and 7 billion parameter models that on some tasks come close to GPT-4. It's quite incredible. So DeepSeek, the folks who released DeepSeek Coder before, and very impressive lineup of models, open sourced VLM 1.3 billion and 7 billion. Incredible, impressive on benchmarks. And the 1.3 billion parameter model is so tiny, you can run this basically offload it on your CPU. And in that vein, we also covered briefly, but we did cover that Transformers.js is very soon, from our friends Innova, is very soon to support WebGPU. WebGPU is the ability to run these models in your browser, in your JavaScript environment, on the GPU of your machine, either that's a Mac or a PC, and that's now landed fully in all major browsers right now. The song that you heard beginning with this was made with Suno V3 Alpha, and I did this specifically for ThursdAI, and I'm very impressed that a year after we started all this, we're now getting songs that sound like somebody actually went in the studio and sang it. We then mentioned that in the AI art and diffusion corner, we still don't have Stable Diffusion 3. We also had another corner today, which is a hardware and robotics corner. And we've covered several very exciting things. We've covered that Cerebras announced the fastest AI chip on Earth with 4 trillion transistors and 900,000 AI cores, able to train up to 24 trillion I don't use the word trillion parameters a lot here, but able to train 24 trillion parameters models on a single device. This sounds incredible, and once they put it in production, I think it's going to be a significant boost to the AI scene. We also covered Xtropic, the folks that came from Google X Secret Lab, now announced Xtropic, the folks behind EAC movement as well. That's their company. They're building a TPU, thermodynamic processing unit. It's a little complex, but basically they want to do natural physical embodiment of probabilistic learning, and they want to be considered the transistor of the AI era. And if you want to hear more about this, they had a full space Q&A that we'll link in the comments below. And so we covered Cerebras, we covered Xtropic in the hardware, and then we've talked about how Figure, the humanoid robot company Figure, we covered before they announced a partnership with OpenAI, and this week they released a demo video that's unedited, so end-to-end recorded in 1x speed of this Figure robot, humanoid robot, standing in something that looks like a fake kitchen and basically talks to the human in front of it using OpenAI's text-to-speech technology and vision. So it actually understands what it sees based on GPT-4 vision, probably a custom version of GPT-4 vision, and also then is able to do some stuff. If you haven't seen this video, I'm going to put it in show notes on ThursdAI.news. Please feel free to subscribe. The video is mind-blowing, but just the fact that the robot can see, talk about what it sees, and then perform tasks embodied in the real world, I think is a great way to see the future happening right now on Pi Day 2024. And I think this is most of the conversation that we've covered from the news perspective, besides this one last thing where we covered that Cognition Labs released a video and actually started letting folks in to something they call Devin, the first fully autonomous AI software engineer. That's the tagline. And obviously, those of us who covered this, we remember AutoGPT hype from last year. We remember multiple different agentic frameworks. Devin seems like it took that to the next level, not only from a perspective of just being able to execute long tasks, but also from the ability of the UI to show you what it does and being autonomous alongside your software engineer. So you could, Devin actually has access to a full environment, probably with GPUs as well. It has access to a browser that you can log into your stuff, and then Devin can, on your behalf, use the browser and go and search for some stuff. And we had one hell of a discussion following the Devin news to talk about, and I think it was started by Nistan saying, hey folks, you have nothing to fear, still learn code, that this news again stoked fears of folks saying, hey, should I even learn to code given these advancements? And we had a great discussion about coding, taking over coders, for example, replacing or not replacing, and positivity in the age of AI. And this discussion, I really suggest you stick to the end of the podcast if you're listening on the podcast, and listen to the whole discussion, because I think it was a great discussion. Hey everyone, my name is Alex Volkov. I'm the host of ThursdAI for the past year, which I can now say proudly. And I just want to welcome you yet again to another Thursday. Today's a big day, not only because we're celebrating, but also because some of us woke up early to see the largest man-made object ever to break through the atmosphere and go to space, which was incredible. Very tech optimist-like. But also today is an anniversary of multiple things, and I think ThursdAI is just one of them. So we're gonna actually talk about this real quick. And I just want to say that I'm very happy to still be here a year after with many people who joined from week to week, from month to month, whatever, friendships that were shaped in the ThursdAI community. And I just want to say I'm very happy that Swix is here. Swix was on the actual first ThursdAI episode a year ago. We jumped in to discuss GPT-4, and I think we're blown away by the vision stuff. So welcome, Swix. How are you? Thanks for waking up early for this.
Hey, good morning. Yeah, it's a big day. The year has felt like 10 years, but it's definitely a big day to celebrate.
Absolutely. So thanks for joining us. Swix, for folks who don't follow for some reason, definitely give Swix a follow, a host of Latent Space and the founder of Small, and recently is being followed by Space Daddy as well. And I want to say
Space Daddy.
Space Daddy. And I want to also say hi to Nistan, who's been maybe the most consistent co-host. Nistan, welcome, joining us all the way from cold Canada, I think, after visiting the doctor. How are you, Nistan?
I'm good. It's good. I missed one, I think.
Yeah, yes.
And that was about it.
I
thought I was going to miss the day, and I was upset. But no,
I have a question for you. Was the doctor that you visited a human doctor or an AI doctor?
Yeah, he was human. He hadn't seen me in 5 years, so I was showing him all this stuff about medicine and AI. It's funny.
Dope. And I also want to acknowledge Farouk, or Pharrell as we call him. Hey, Pharrell, how are you?
Hey, what's up?
Welcome to the ThursdAI celebration. Pharrell is leading the Skunksworks crew and has been doing different incredible things in the open source. Very staunch proponent of open source here on the ThursdAI stage. If anything gets released and it doesn't get released with the source, Pharrell will have words to say about this. So we're going to cover open source today as well. I also want to acknowledge that LDJ, yesterday I wrote a whole thread and acknowledged like many people, and I didn't tag my good friend Luigi. So LDJ, apologies for that. Welcome, brother. How are you doing all the way from Florida?
Yeah, I'm doing good, thanks. I've been late to a lot of the ThursdAI's past few months, but yeah, it's been good coming on, and I'm glad I was able to make it on time for this one.
Yeah, welcome. And I also want to acknowledge Ray. Ray is the dev advocate on Pinecone, and Ray has been participating in many spaces. We had a lot of conversation about rag versus long context, and I remember those well. A lot of like late night conversations as well. Welcome, Ray. How are you, dude?
How's it going, everybody? Congrats, Alex, on this awesome anniversary.
Thank you. So for folks who are joining us just now, I also look, there's a bunch of folks I see in the audience who are here from week to week, and it's so great to see the community shape up. And I really couldn't be prouder to be able to just talk about AI with friends and actually make a living out of this. I would be amiss if I don't acknowledge that the anniversary today is from the spaces. So we started talking about AI in Twitter spaces, or back then Twitter spaces, now X spaces, exactly a year ago, or Pi Day 2023. The reason why we started talking about AI is because GPT-4 was announced, and Greg Brockman gave the incredible demo where he took a screenshot of a Discord. So you remember this, the famous Discord where we went to hunt this Discord snapshot?
Yeah, it basically like took a screenshot of the OpenAI Discord, and it just transcribed every word in there and described every the position of every icon and like the framing of it. It was just like the best vision model we'd ever seen by a lot.
By a significant margin, and it understood different like active states, etc. And to get to a point now where we're basically having open source models. We're going to talk about CogVLM today. We're going to talk about DeepSeek released a new vision model today. To get to the point where we can basically recreate this with a tiny model that runs completely offloaded is crazy. Back then, no vision existed. So we got into space, started geeking out about this, and then we kept going. So this is the anniversary of the Twitter Spaces. The actual podcast, the ThursdAI podcast that I encourage you to subscribe to, didn't start about 4 or 5 months afterwards, after we did this and the community started shaping up and people started coming in and actual guests started to arrive. So I see a few guests that became friends of the pod. So if you guys see Jun Yang here in the audience on the technical team at Qwen, there's a great conversation that we had about Qwen and their models as well. We have a bunch of folks like this from time to time just join and talk about the stuff they built. And I think this is the best thing that I get from ThursdAI is definitely this, is the ability to talk with folks who are experts in their fields. And definitely I'm not an expert in many of the things we cover. And it's great to have folks from Vision and from foundational model training and from open source. And we had a bunch of conversation with news research folks. We're going to cover a few of those today as well. And it's just been incredible so far. And so the birthday for the actual podcast, once we started recording and sending a newsletter, is coming up in June. Meanwhile, if you want to support the space, if you're here and you're like, oh, this is great, I learned so much, you're more than welcome to just interact with us. On the bottom right, there's like a little icon there, the message icon that says 5. You're more than welcome to just send replies there and boost a little bit of the signal and retweet the space link. And so I think with this, oh no, a year ago, another thing was released and it went under the radar because GPT-4 took all over the airwaves. Claude 1 was released exactly a year ago as well. Happy anniversary, the Claude team. They've been killing it lately. The past few weeks have been Anthropic weeks for sure. And definitely folks are looking at Claude and now considering canceling the subscription. So that's been great to see. And so a year ago, they released Claude 1 and they were quickly hidden with the news. I also want to shout out that in the past year as well, open source were almost non-existent. So a year ago and 4 days, Llama.cpp was first released. Georgy Gerganov released Llama.cpp, a way to run the Llama model that was released a month before that on just your local hardware. And nobody knew about this necessarily until a few days later. Vicuna was just released. So if you guys remember Vicuna, that was the thing. So all of these things happened in that week. And it feels like this week we have, or at least last few weeks, we have like similar like insanity weeks. Don't you guys think? Especially with Opus and the rumors about GPT-4. Do you guys remember anything else from that last week before we start like talking about this week?
It's hard to remember what happened last week because this week felt like a century alone. That's the thing. Like we've had so much just in the last week that I don't even remember what happened.
Absolutely. That's why we write down. And honestly, I think Swix, we talked about this where now that every ThursdAI is now recapped and you have AI newsletter daily or that covers everything. This is just for the historical record. It's very important just to be able to go a year back and see where we were, because it's really hard to remember even last week, not to mention the last year. So I think it's very important. I do want to shout out, do you still call this small talk or do you have AI news?
It's just AI news. I'm reserving small talk for the other products that I'm working on.
I see.
But yeah, AI news.
So talk to us about AI news just briefly for folks who are not familiar with that specific newsletter.
Man, this week was fucking crazy. In around December, I was like very overwhelmed by all the AI discords, and I knew that all the alphas being dropped in discords and no longer on Twitter. So I started making this bot to scrape discords, and it was mostly just serving myself. And then I shared it with some friends, and it grew to like a couple hundred people. But one of them was Sumit Chintala from the Meta team. Like he was the creator of PyTorch and still runs PyTorch. And last week he shouted it out, saying that he said it was like the highest leverage 45 minutes every day that he spends reading this thing, which was like a freaking huge endorsement from someone like him.
45 minutes from the guy who runs PyTorch. It's crazy.
I didn't even know he was subscribed. I don't even look at the subscriber newsletter. I think it's really good for mental health to just do your thing, right? Don't even look at who's on the list. And then 2 days ago, Andre also just like unsolicited, completely no notice, no warning, just said, oh yeah, I've been reading this thing for a while. And I was like, what? And then I went back and looked through the emails, and like his email's not there. There's no, his first name not there, last name not there. I eventually found his email, but yeah, it was just a shock that he was also getting utility out of it. And so far I think like 13,000 people signed up in the past couple of days, and we'll see where this goes. I think a newsletter is not the last final form, and also people have legitimate concerns around how much is comfortable being scraped from Discord. What is the sort of privacy expectation on a public Discord that anyone can join, right? So I'm taking some steps to basically protect people. It's purely meant for utility, not for snooping on people's conversations. But I do think like there should be a new sort of Hacker News of AI, quote unquote, that pulls together local Llama, Twitter, Discord, YouTube, podcasts, whatever. And yeah, I think that's what I'm making AI news go towards.
And of course, everything that Andre is excited about, Elon is excited about as well. So Elon now is a follower of Latent Space, which is a big moment. I wanted to ask about, do you scrape local Llama, by the way? Is local Llama part of the source as well? Or?
The engineer that I'm working with is working on this. So not yet, but we are working on it. And
all right, folks. So if you want not only high signal, but if you want like the full fire hose of information scraped from Discords and Twitter list. I think you have a high signal Twitter list as well in there. Definitely subscribe to AI News, previously Small Talk, as like titans of the industry now follow this and getting insight from this, so you should as well. But if that's too much for you, we're here every week to cover pretty much the very most important things. And so I think it's time for us to start with open source. Open source AI, let's get it started. All right, folks. So let's cover some open source stuff. I think the first thing is we have to mention that our friends from News Research announcing a new model today, or I guess yesterday night. It's called Hermes Pro. Hermes Pro is specifically, I'm not really sure what Pro means here, so we have to ask some folks from News Research. But they announced the continued training of their Mistral model, their flagship model, that is fine-tuned for tool use and function calling. And tool use and function calling may be, how should I say, synonyms of each other at this point. I think it started with function calling from OpenAI that was released in June last year. And they gave us function calling in response of all of us wanting a JSON output. And since then, function calling became something called tool use, basically the ability of these models to not only tell you the next word or autocomplete, but also you could provide schemas for some of your functions that these models will say, hey, I want more information on this topic or that topic. And so here is what tool you should use. And you as a developer, you would get that response. You would go call this tool. You would then pass back the data from this tool into the model, and then the model will use its context and the user's request together to come up with an answer. So think about stock price, right? Stock price is something that changes often. You cannot train a model on stock price because it changes very often. So for one example of a tool could be go check the stocks on the stock market or go check Bitcoin price, etc. And the model is not able to. It's very obvious if you ask a Mistral 7B, hey, what's the price of Bitcoin? It will give you something. That something will be 100% wrong, hallucination. So a model with tool use would be able to decide that if a developer provided in advance the model with tools like, hey, price of Bitcoin, price of stock, etc., the model would be able to decide that instead of hallucinating the answer, it would actually return a reply to the developer and say, hey, go get me this information, and then I'll be able to answer the user, right? So this is what tool use and function calling basically is. And we haven't had a lot of that in open source. We had a little bit. We've talked about a tool use leaderboard from the folks at Gorilla, I think Stanford, I'm not sure. And then now News Research released us a continued training of their 7B model called Hermes Pro with the same general capabilities. So that's also very important, right? You keep training a model. You don't want something called catastrophic forgetting. You want the model to perform the same plus additional things as well. And now it's trained on new data with tool use plus JSON mode as well. So not only do we get the ability of the model to reply back and say, hey, you should use this function, we also get JSON mode as well. It supports custom pydantic schema. Pydantic, for folks who don't write in Python, is a way to define objects in Python in a very clear way. And when you use this and you give the model kind of the schema for your tool use, the model then knows what parameters to call your functions with. So your job as a developer is basically just take this call and forward it to any API call that you want. It's available on the hub, and it's announced with OpenAI endpoint compatibility, which is great. So I don't think we've seen this from Hermes so far directly. I think everybody who served news models, they gave us OpenAI compatibility, but definitely we know that the industry is coalescing around the same format, which is the OpenAI endpoint, where you can just replace the URL to either Open Router or Fireworks or whatever. I think LeChat from Mistral as well is supporting OpenAI compatibility. Great to see that we're getting open source models for tool use, because it's very important for agents, and it's very important for basically building on top of these LLMs. LDJ, I saw you wave your hand a little bit. Did you have a chance to look at Hermes Pro and tool use, and what are your general thoughts about open source tool use?
Yeah, just in general, pretty much Hermes, but also has much improved JSON and function calling abilities and things like that. And I was just waving my hand to describe that, but then you pretty much described it already, so I put my hand back down. But yeah, you got a good description of it, and I think that pretty much summarizes it.
Hey, this is the anniversary, this ThursdAI BirthdAI, so I did my homework this time. Usually, sometimes these things get released like super fast, and we actually don't have time to prepare. Comments on general availability of function calling and tool use from the stage before we move on? Anything that you guys want to shout out specifically that's interesting here?
It's probably the most commercial used part, I think, because every person that's using a 7B, they want a really fast model, and usually they want some kind of JSON returned for commercial uses. There are chat uses as well, but I think like the majority of, I don't have any data on this, I'm just guessing that probably the majority of the use is to return JSON.
Yeah, and then there are tools like Pydantic from Jason Liu that we've talked about that help you extract like structured data from some of these, and those tools require function calling as well. And function calling and Pydantic support, so definitely supports more enterprisey. Maybe that's why Technium decided to call this Hermes Pro. Moving on to Together and Sequoia. And Together released something called Sequoia, which is speculative decoding. I actually wrote down an explanation of what speculative decoding is, and I'm going to try to run through this. So for folks who are not familiar with speculative decoding, basically, if you think about how we get open source, how we get bigger and better AI on to run locally on our machines, one of them is open source and smaller models getting better, right? So that's definitely something we've seen for the past year. We got Llama 70B, and then we got Llama 13B, and then different fine tunes and different other foundational models started beating the Llama 70B, definitely Llama 1, and now even Llama 2 is getting beaten by tinier models. So the progress of throwing more compute and more techniques is shrinking down these models to us being able to run them locally just because our hardware is, let's say, limited. That's one way that we get local open source models. They just keep improving and keep getting trained on. Another way is we're able to serve these like bigger or larger models, like 70B models on consumer GPUs, but then it's like super slow. So you wait 1 minute or 2 minutes between each token prediction or each word that you see. So one additional way on top of just getting smaller models faster and smarter is improving inference. So we saw a bunch of attempts this year from folks like Modular releasing their max inference system, and improvements obviously in different like places like flash attention and different inference engines as well. So we saw all of this, and one such way that adds to all of this is called speculative decoding, which improves the inference speed, just inference speed. It basically tries to predict a few next tokens instead of just one using a smaller model. And the key idea is to construct a tree of speculated future tokens for every potential token in the model's output. Sometimes they use, I think at least Llama.cpp supports speculative decoding. Sometimes they use a smaller model. For example, for Llama, they could use like a smaller Llama to help you predict the tokens, and then the larger Llama to actually help select them. And together, folks who released a few things that we've covered before, employ TreeDAO there, who released the Mamba architecture and the Hyena architecture we've talked about previously before, also Flash Attention Chief. They now released their own take on speculative decoding, which they claim that on consumer GPUs, you'd be able to run something up to 70 billion parameter Llama 2. With RTX 4090, and they improve the ability of you to run this incredible like large model by almost 9x faster. On non-consumer GPUs like A100s, they also go up to 4x faster. Basically, by just predicting with a smaller model, all like building a tree of all possible tokens, and then the larger model actually selects and predicts somehow based on those. They have a bunch of other things like offloading there and very interesting things. But I just want to say that this is a field, speculative decoding is a field that is entirely, how should I say? They only support Llama as far as I saw, but this whole field is entirely additive to the rest of the fields, right? So if speculative decoding helps to improve Llama 70B 9x faster, it's probably going to work on smaller models as well. So it's really incredible to see how much different speed improvements we're getting across the board, and definitely for the stuff that we all love to talk about, which is open source models running locally, running faster. This is incredible. Yeah, DJ, go ahead.
Yeah, just wanted to direct people to, I pinned on the billboard a video that Together AI put out, actually showing side by side Sequoia versus not Sequoia. And yeah, it's pretty insane the amount of speed up you're able to get.
The amount of speed up on the same hardware and on the same model. So the model didn't improve, the hardware didn't improve. All they improved is the ability to help the model predict next tokens and spit them out, which is, I agree with you, it's insane. And just multiple improvements across the board are going to get us where basically we want to go, which is these type of models, these sizes of models running super fast on local hardware. They released it in GitHub. Folks can try. It only works for Llama. It doesn't work for like any other bigger models as well. Definitely we'll see. I will just say that the thing that I'm most excited about this is that all these techniques are, one, additive, and two, they're there for the next big model to get released and just support them. So like when Llama 3 eventually releases, and we know it will release, these models will be able, this speculative decoding will start working, and then speculative decoding will start working. Llama.cpp will already be there. So we saw the community efforts to support everything were just kicked into gear when Gemma was released. I'm just very excited that we have all these techniques to throw at kind of the next open source, the big model open source. And just the concept of running a 70 billion parameter model is very exciting. Last week, we covered something from Jeremy Howard and John Whitaker and Tim Dietmers, the folks with ThursdAI and QLoRa, combined QLoRa with another technique to be able to train 70 billion parameters, or at least fine-tune them on kind of consumer hardware as well. We're not only getting news for the past week and 2 weeks of being able to fine-tune 70 billion parameter models on consumer-ish hardware. We're also getting news about being able to run them with some logical number of tokens per second and not a one token every like 4 minutes or something. Exciting news in open source. Maybe we cover DeepSeek VLM here as its vision, but yeah, definitely released in open source, and we don't want to miss. So DeepSeek, the folks behind DeepSeek Coder, and released DeepSeek VL, a state-of-the-art 1.3 billion and 7 billion visual parameter models. If you guys remember last week, we talked with Vic Huntag of Moondream 2, and that was a tiny vision model. And the whole point, and if you were here in the beginning, when we in Swix got excited about a year ago about the vision capabilities of GPT-4, the whole point with these vision models is that their improvement this year definitely felt exponential, because now a model of 1.3 billion parameters, a tiny model that most Macs can now run very easily. And if our friend Zenova is going to join us, it's very soon with WebGPU, you're going to be able to run fully in browser. These models now are able to perform very similarly to what we saw a year ago and just blew our minds, which is OCR, without an OCR model built in, understanding objects, understanding graphs and charts, etc. And so it's very interesting that DeepSeek Coder, and let me try to share this into the space. Yeah, it should be up there as well. Very interesting that DeepSeek released and is punching above its weight, significantly above its weight, and they actually try to compare themselves to GPT-4 Vision, which is quite remarkable on different tasks like evaluation, multi-images, and then in some of these tasks, they get to half performance of GPT-4 Vision, which is still quite incredible, right? Like it's a 7 billion parameter model. GPT-4, we still don't know how many parameters this is. We still don't know if GPT-4 Vision is a mixture of expert model or not, but DeepSeek Coder is actually coming close to the same performance as GPT-4 on common sense task and analysis task.
Yeah, and I just want to say, Llama.cpp supports these models. I don't know about DeepSeek, but they've supported all the other ones. And there's also a Lava CLI in there, which you can use with these ones. Also, when you're on the server, you can run the models as well. I think they just need a little bit more compute and engineering, and they can match GPT-4 when it comes to vision. I am quite surprised that it wasn't that big of a deal. In some ways, Cog VLM, not DeepSeek, is a lot better than the rest, but it's also a larger model too. Well, and I quickly wanted to say, because you mentioned Zenova before, I don't know if you're going to go more into that, but it turns out that people of the core Chrome team or Chrome Canary that implement WebGPU, they listen to ThursdAI, and stuff that we've been saying over the years, over the months, they've actually started implementing. And the most exciting thing that I find now is that they're trying to implement int8 support natively in WebGPU. So that will do another savings of half the memory, when you run stuff, even if you have a GPU that doesn't necessarily support int8. I think there was a method to run at half the memory. So remember, we went from only supporting float 32 a few months back. I think it was September. You needed a weird started version of Canary with a few commands to support float 16. So now they're supporting int8. So the memory requirements of the browser have dropped down by 4x in the last 5-6 months.
I remember the days before
nuts.
before web GPU support even landed, like all of Transformers.js. And for folks who are not like following us like that closely, Zenova is a friend of the pod, the author of Transformers.js. We talked a lot on the pod. He actually announced him joining Hugging Face on the pod as well. And he created Transformers.js, which is a way in JavaScript and Node to run these models via the Onyx platform. And when we talked about this before, the only way to run these models in the browser was like fully CPU. And then we always talked about, okay, web GPU is going to come at some point. Web GPU is the ability to tap into GPU inference from the browser environment, from the Chrome environment. And since then, web GPU was still a spec, then it was announced, then it was released, and now it's fully supported everywhere. But like Nissan, like you're saying, it only supports 32, right? And a bit, can you describe this part a little bit more? And then now they're listening to us and actually lending support for quantized version of these models, a smaller version, to be able to run even smaller models that perform the same. And
so now Chrome, you don't even need Canary, and it will support float 16. And by default, if you only have CPU, stuff can run now on the CPU in float 32. But again, the biggest use for this so far has not actually been chatbots, even though chatbots do work. Has been more the visual stuff and the effects, all the diffusion based, some stuff of function calling. That's where stuff gets pretty exciting because it changes what kind of applications you can build. It's again, it's the front end. Like, what are you going to put before they reach this big GPU cluster? So it's pretty. This is the part where we're going to see the most changes and progress, in my opinion. It's going to be the visual stuff, making use of Transformers.js library.
And one example that Zenova showed on his feed is a real-time background removal from video. So you play video and then imagine a Chrome extension that's loaded or something, and then you're able to run AI transformer stuff on top of everything that you read or see. That's the kind of stuff we're talking about with access to GPU. I think is going to be possible. So super, super exciting to see how this performs. And obviously, this means that the models that we talk about running locally will just get more use because developers will be able to build them in. This will never get to the point of GPT-4 level for full generality, or I don't want to say never, but it's not quite there in terms of, okay, running a GPT-4 level model fully in your browser. But for some specific tasks like vision, we just talked about on several benchmarks, CogVLM and this tiny new release from DeepSeek VLM is now getting there, right? So you'd be able to analyze images, for example. You'd be able to do all kinds of things in the browser fully without loading, without Python environments, without all of these things. I think it means a lot for user experience as well. I think we've covered open source a bunch. Do you guys have anything else worth mentioning in the open source thing briefly before we move on to the big companies, and maybe we're going to discuss agents as well?
Command R.
Yeah, so Command R, interestingly, it's both in the open source and not, so maybe it's a good transition, right? Let's actually do this as a transitional topic. So Cohere, the company that, I don't know, raised a bunch of millions of dollars, and everybody expected it to be like the second, like Anthropic, and didn't for a while, now is back, and very impressively is back. And so for a long time, I think Cohere refocused their efforts on something like RAG. They had the Cohere re-ranking model and they had the metting models for a while. And they focused on, I know that we in Weights and Biases, we use Cohere re-ranker for our RAG bot, and that's improving our responses significantly. Re-ranking is basically receiving back from your vector database a few responses that are near neighbor equivalent to what your user has asked for, and then running another process of re-ranking them for higher, how should I say, accuracy. And so Cohere re-ranker was for a long time like one of the more standard ones that folks use. And now Cohere actually stepped in and said, hey, we're releasing a new model. It's called Command R. It's a new generative model from Cohere, aimed at production scale tasks like RAG, retrieval augmented generation, and using external tools and APIs. So here's this word again, external tools use and APIs as well. As we previously discussed, tool use is important. We just got tool use in fully open source thanks to News Research, and I haven't yet tested their tool use. But Cohere is definitely building this model. And I think, Swix, you also saw this release, and we kind of both identified the same pretty much thing, where this is interestingly not getting compared to any GPT-4 or Claude Opus, right? They're not even trying. They have a very specific use case in mind. And I wanted to see from you, Swix, if you have any comments on that, or how they're positioning themselves, and what specifically, in what world they're operating in.
For Command R.
For Command R and Cohere is general, yeah.
Simple answer is probably is not as good as GPT-4.
Yep.
So they didn't include it. But I haven't tried it out personally myself. People seem to be talking about it for retrieval and RAG type use cases, but I can't give my personal endorsement. Just in general, Cohere, I think they've been more active in sort of enterprise use cases and fine-tuning, talking about their fine-tuning capabilities or long tail, low resource language, maybe use cases. They also released Aya, I think, last month, which some people in the open source community were quite excited about. But yeah, I think seeing them do such a strong launch for a new model, I think is a second win for Cohere, and I'm excited to see more coming out of them.
Definitely feels like a second win, and we don't know how much we covered Cohere here before, but the fact that they released the model also in open weights on Hugging Face, I think gives them a lot of credibility from the community. LDJ, go ahead.
Yeah, I noticed they did actually post some benchmarks on the website of comparison to Llama 270 billion, Mistral, and GPT 3.5 Turbo, and all comparisons and RAG benchmarks.
Mm-hmm.
And Command R does seem to be all of those three that I just mentioned. And of course, this is their own reporting. It's probably good to wait for third-party benchmarks, but yeah, and it's apparently very good at multilingual abilities as well. I think I saw somebody saying that somebody who one of their first languages is Portuguese, they said Command R was one of the best languages, or one of the best models that was able to do that actually very fluently and understand the nuances of the language. So yeah, I think that's really interesting, and it might just be really good overall model for open source.
Yeah,
I think it is open source. It's open source, but I think it's just non-commercial license.
Yeah, so they did open weights release with non-commercial license, and they did say that if you're an enterprise, you want to build something cool with Command R, talk to them and they'll figure out something. And Aidan Gomez, the CEO of Cohere, is one of the authors on the Attention is All You Need paper. Recently has unblocked and became friends with Nistan here in the Toronto community. He mentioned that this model is also optimized for 10 major languages for global business and trained on 13 more. So it actually has a pre-trained on 13 more. Has 128 context window, right? So if you do compare this to GPT 3.5 Turbo or Mixtral, for example, I don't remember Mixtral. I think Mixtral is 32K context. This is 128K, and they specifically focus on speed in addition to everything else, right? And in RAG systems, in these systems, you may not need a model that's super smart. You may need a model that is able to retrieve everything that you want much faster, and significant speed improvements may outperform smartness on MMLU task, right? So I think that's their game. They're playing it. They compare, like LDJ said, to 3.5 and Mixtral and not GPT-4 or Opus. And they have results in something called KILT, knowledge-intensive language tasks, and the retrieval and tool use specifically. And so they also have a bunch of stuff on their platform to be able to do tool use. And by tool, like I explained before, go get me some news from the web, for example. So it's really focused on web integration, getting things from the web. Nistan, do you see the one line they posted where it's basically they said, hey, here's Perplexity based on Command R? I think you replied to that. Do you remember? Do you want to cover this briefly? It was really fun as an example.
Yeah, I shared it in the Jumbotron. It's the third thing. It looks like it's pretty easy to build a RAG pipeline with their code, but not all of it is open. There are a few things there which are unclear, and I haven't built that pipeline yet to say for sure. So I don't want to say anything that it's incorrect, but it looks like they've made it really easy to build your own Perplexity in 5 lines of code.
That was really funny, like a little dig at perplexity. Definitely the model is able to do like web, like the tool of web search. This model specifically is like excels at, but definitely other tools as well. So shout out to Cohere, second win, like Swig said. Definitely will keep you guys posted when some of us try this open weights model that you can run, but not commercially, but you can use it and train, and maybe this will help open source folks as well. Moving on from Cohere, I think in the same battlefield, actually, Anthropic gave us an announcement yesterday, and very smart release schedule from Anthropic, I must say, right? So they released Claude 3. They announced Claude 3 a few weeks ago. They announced 3 versions. Opus, which is their flagship that now many people prefer on top of GPT-4, which is quite incredible. It's not taken over on LMCs yet, so GPT-4 still takes over on the LMCs people arena, but I think we've been coming back here week after week and saying that some more folks use Opus. Let me see, just by raising hands, do you guys use Opus for the past week at least once? What do you have, a thumbs up or thumbs down for Opus use?
Oh yeah, I use it every day.
Every day. Wow. So you got the Pro thing, or are you using the API?
Yeah, I got Pro, but apparently I'm a chump because I don't have to use Pro. Like only like B2C non-developer types should use Pro. Every developer should just use the Anthropic Workbench because you just pay by API call, and you're probably using less than $30 worth.
I will say this like very quietly because maybe Anthropic people in there, you don't even have to pay. Unless you apply for production use, you don't even have to put a credit card. You just open and you get API calls for free. I will say this. There's a Tony Ding released like a year ago, I think, something called Typing Mind, which is like a front end for ChatGPT basically, but on the back end you can put every model that you want. So basically you get the ChatGPT experience, including vision stuff. You can upload images as well, and I think that costs like $30. So if you get that, and you plug in your API key that you get from Anthropic for free, you basically get the same experience. You don't have to pay the $20 a month. So,
do you use Typing Mind every day? I hear some social media buzz about it, but I don't see any AI engineer type people using it.
I haven't used it up until I had to try Claude 3, and I didn't want to pay the extra $20 just remember another subscription, so I just plugged it into Typing Mind, and it's a nice experience. I still go to Workbench. Workbench is more for us, for engineers, right? Workbench, everything that you get there, you can immediately export and continue via the API, for example. And Workbench is annoying because you have to remember to every prompt that you have, every answer that the model gives you, you have to have click a button and put it back in kind of the stack of messages, right? So that's the one.
You can use keyboard. You can use keyboard shortcuts, but it's also meant for you to prototype prompts, right? So that's what you want to do. You want your conversations not to persist. You want to see the output, and you're like, okay, throw away the output. I'll tweak the prompt again, generate the new output. So you don't want it to auto add to the conversation. That's true. That's the main difference.
That's true. And so definitely many folks use the Workbench for prototyping prompts is great, but just for chatting is also great. So you've been using it. So what's your take on Opus so far?
Oh yeah, if you go to AI News every day now, I'm generating Haiku, Opus, and what's the other one? Sonnet. By the way, did you know that the names of these things basically hint at the model size?
Yeah, let's talk about this. Opus is like a big...
Yeah.
Haiku is 3 lines long. Sonnet is 14 lines long. Interestingly, and Opus is unbounded, but in 3B, 14B, and probably 8 times 220B. Yeah, I think the Claude people thought they were very smart by just encoding the numbers.
I gotta applaud them about the name because I stopped saying Claude 3. I'm just saying Opus now, and everybody gets what we're talking about. Opus is a brand name that's built in like separately from Claude 3, which is, I think, very smart. Like I'm 3.5, 4 vision, all these things. Like it's a little harder to say, and now they came out like with actual names, and I gotta applaud the strategy. I think just to connect the dots back to where we are today. Yesterday, Claude finally released the announced Haiku. And yes, Wix, you had another comment that I spoke over?
Nothing. I was just going to say, if you want to do, you should be generating things side by side and seeing the model difference. Haiku is very bad at instruction following. Sonnet is actually really surprisingly good enough. I would use Sonnet for most things. And then Opus is more powerful but slow, and honestly not really worth it. And if you want to see side by side generations, just go in the last few issues of AI News. You'll see side by side, and you can decide for yourself which one you prefer. Yeah, so I run all the summaries through Sonnet and Opus and Haiku every day now, and I can see the difference. I would say the general take is that Claude 3 in general is better at instruction following and summarization than GPT-4, which is huge. I can't believe I'm just saying that
on
the anniversary of GPT-4.
Yes.
But it hallucinates more. There are like very obvious inconsistencies in like the things that it tries to, the facts that it picks up on, and they're just plain wrong. And anyone with any knowledge of the subject matter will spot that immediately. So Sumif, when he was talking about Claude 3, actually referenced some examples from AI News in his timeline. If you go check out the Sumif's timeline on Claude 3. And yeah, I will say like that is the problem with using Claude 3. Like it follows instructions very well, but then it will hallucinate things. Maybe because it doesn't have as good of a world model as GPT-4. Whatever it is, now I'm having to decide as a product creator, am I using Claude 3 because the vibes are better, but then do I have to build an anti-hallucination pipeline, which I'm trying to build, but it's difficult because what is truth?
Yes. Let me ask you a question real quick. Let me, one second, Nissan, and then Nissan, you go. Swix, one question. Did you change your prompts for Claude specifically from your GPT-4 prompts?
I copied over some of it and I wrote some other parts from scratch. I understand that a lot of people say you should use XML for this stuff.
Yeah.
I think that is a little bit of mumbo jumbo, especially because I'm not doing structured output.
I will say this thing. They have Alex Albert, who's now getting more of a highlighted role. He's the guy that we've talked about that did the needle in a haystack analysis where Claude Opus realized that it's getting tested, right? So you probably saw this famous tweet. So Alex is the prompt engineer there. He has a collab that's called a meta prompt. So you can find it. I'm probably going to put this in show notes. That you basically describe the task that you want, and then Opus comes up with the prompt for Opus itself. And the prompts that it comes up with worked for me way better than the prompts that I written myself. So it does use a little bit of XML. And I just want to say to the audience, not necessarily to you, but definitely to you as well, some different prompting is needed. So these models do need different, they've been trained differently. And XML is one part of it, but also it feels like a little bit of more prompting, and folks can't just expect to have the same prompt that works for GPT-4 to work. I think some of our intuition as well changes per model. Some models, like you said, are like more hallucinatively, but follow instructions better. Definitely, I saw this. Nistan, I cut you off before. If you still remember where I cut you off, please continue.
No, it was along this side. So I've used Sonnet, and I just opened the Bing sidebar, and quickly iterate through stuff with Sonnet. And yeah, I noticed the same thing. It does make up a lot of stuff. So then I need to drop it into Bing in precision mode and have it actually look up the stuff. And then it's still not quite ideal. But this combination I also use with Mistral Large, just switching between Bing with internet mode and either Sonnet or Mistral Large to quickly iterate through. Although Mistral Large is slow. So again, I really like the speed of Sonnet.
Yeah, so let's actually pick up on the kind of the news thing. So we covered like Claude before, and now we're talked about as actually folks putting it in production like Swix, and we're also testing this. Anthropic released Haiku, which is their smallest model, and that doesn't compete with any GPT-4. They go for the lowest price and the fastest kind of execution. Fairly similar to the Command R kind of area of playground that we got, right? So like focusing on speed, focusing on as best performance as possible for the fastest and the cheapest price possible. And we definitely heard before from multiple folks who fine-tune GPT 3.5, for example, and get better results than GPT-4 on fine-tune GPT 3.5 and significantly faster as well. So Anthropic released Haiku, which is their fastest and most affordable model for enterprise applications. They stress enterprise because every dollar, every token counts, every dollar counts, and you actually get to measure these models not only on how good they are, but also how good they are compared to how much money you pay for them and how fast they respond to your users. And the main differences between Haiku and like GPT 3.5 or even 1.0 Pro and Gemini, the main differences is price. It's priced at 25 cents per million tokens, which GPT 3.5 is $0.50 per million tokens. So half the price. The output tokens are $1.25 for million output tokens, which usually enterprises, they do prompt engineering. So they shove a bunch of stuff in the prompt, but the response is not that long. So you focus on the input tokens as well. It gets 75 on MMLU and 89 on GSM 4K, which is significantly beats GPT 3.5. Now, they may have used the announced 3.5 metrics and not the actual metrics, which oftentimes folks do, but still is a very important, very impressive. And it does human eval 75%, almost 76% on human eval on code, which is quite impressive for a super fast model. But I think the highlight of the differences between 3.5 or Gemini 1 Pro is that Haiku is vision enabled, right? So you can pass images. It's quite impressively so vision enabled. So whatever we got excited about last year, I think now is possible with like up to 25 seconds per million tokens, which is quite incredible. You can use it everywhere pretty much. It's million tokens is a lot. And also it has 200. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Swik.
One caveat or question is the vision model in Haiku the same vision model as in Sonnet or Opus, right? Maybe it's dumbed down as well, and so
Probably
no one's really run any of the benchmarks on this stuff.
Yeah, and then I think it's worth calling out that like now the same level 3.5 speed and performance, significant like improvement of performance, plus vision enabled, plus 200,000 context window as well, which 3.5 is, I think still is at 8. So shout out to Anthropic, sorry, not Cohere, to Anthropic to keep bringing us the news. The release schedule was very well timed. They released the biggest two models and then followed up with this fast model. And for folks who are looking for how to use or maybe lower their costs with the same performance, it's very interesting. Anthropic promised us tool use and function calling and haven't yet gave us function calling. They said that these models are able to do function calling and tool use, but we still are not able to use this. For your preferences, you may go here. Big companies and APIs, I think that's most of what we want to cover, but I think we're smoothly moving towards the next area where we talk about hardware and robotics, because one big company joined another big company a few weeks ago, and now it's worth talking about OpenAI and Figure, the humanoid robot. Figure has been in the news. They showed Case the robot for a while. Their, I think, main competitor. It's funny how Boston Dynamics was the big name in robotics for a while, and now all these companies are leapfrogging Boston Dynamics at some fields. So Figure has this humanoid robot. It has 10 fingers. It moves them very freely. It's very interesting. Recently, they announced the integration with OpenAI, and I think OpenAI also announced the integration with Figure. And now they released a video, and that video is bonkers. It's really, folks, it's really bonkers. They show the Figure robot standing just like in some form of a lab. Funnily enough, on the back wall, it says AGI lab. And then that Figure robot has a little screen on its face. And that screen shows you the same exact interface that you and I get in the ChatGPT iOS app, with the little circle that turns into a few animated things when you talk to it. And I found it really funny that they insisted on keeping the same kind of UI. And basically, this person comes up to this Figure and says, hey, what do you see right now? And the robot uses the onboard cameras to send image, I guess it's one image, to GPT-4 Vision, and replies with, I see, literally the robot says, I see you standing in front of me with your hand on the table. So that was like one quirk of how the robot knows that the person that talked to it is the person who actually stands in front of it. But I think they stress that this video is end-to-end, not edited, and it's 1x speed also. And the robot replies fairly fast. Time to speak on OpenAI's GPT-4 is quite fast anyway. If you use the app, you know this. But the vision stuff, maybe they got like some private versions of API. Responses, folks on the stage, did you see this video? What do you think of this? Is the Terminator coming, or we're still not there? What are some of your responses to this Figure video now with OpenAI Brain? Ray, go ahead.
Yeah, very shortly before that, I listened to Jan LeCun's podcast with Lex. Yeah, and what struck me about that demo was that we're actually quite close to having usable robots just using the reasoning that is available on OpenAI. And I think that's remarkable. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, you're like, oh, these things are not thinking. They're just spitting out next tokens and whatnot. But more and more, I feel myself drawn into Ilya's camp, where you're like, no, there's probably some world model that these things have to develop internally, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to accomplish all these tasks that are essentially what you need is some sort of an understanding of embodiment in order to like reason about where to move your limbs and how to pick up things and things of that sort. I don't know. I just thought that there was like a really stark contrast between what they showed in the demo and that conversation. More optimistic today than I was before.
Absolutely. And I think if there was one additional reason is that to sue OpenAI, for Elon to sue, is that Optimus is definitely a bet that Tesla is making now. Tesla's whole reason for existing was to bring the world renewable energy. And when Optimus was announced, many kind of investors thought was like, hey, is this moving the vision a little bit forward? And because Optimus does not bring the world renewable energy, Optimus is advancing super quick as well. We saw for the past year multiple demos. The last demo blew me away in terms of dexterity of different fingers and everything. And then you got to wonder how smart Optimus will actually be in terms of the ability of it to perform tasks and respond to you. And Figure announced their advanced robot, and then they announced the integration with OpenAI, which we know that Elon is now on the warpath with. And so I got to wonder if their communication, their integration, now that Elon has also Opus and Grok, given where Grok is right now, and I posted this as a question on my timeline, is would you prefer Optimus, who's better and more flashier, but with Grok brains, versus a Figure with GPT-5 brains or something? And I think it was quite obvious where the distribution lies. You would want the less flashy robot that's smarter, potentially, than the flashier robot that is GPT 3.5 level. So the understanding of the scene was very impressive there. The text-to-speech was very natural. I don't know if you guys noticed in this video, but the robot actually ums and ahs and takes pauses, and it feels like they built something like this. They used probably the same text-to-speech as OpenAI, but it feels like OpenAI gave them a little bit of a better model, because I use the OpenAI's text-to-speech often via the iOS app, and it doesn't go, you know what? I actually think this.
To be fair, I've started seeing this behavior in text-to-speech with Pi first. Pi already does this ums and ahs and a more natural kind of cadence.
Yeah, Pi is very expressive for sure. LDJ, go ahead.
Yeah, I actually use a custom instruction with ChatGPT where I give it a set of principles to follow, and the last principle is make sure to include ums and uhs in your speech and as if you're talking. And I feel like when I use the conversational voice mode, it makes it feel a lot more realistic, because then it's actually literally saying uhs and ums, and it does end up doing that with me.
Yeah. So I definitely noticed this, and this could be just a result of something like a custom instruction, or maybe they're using a different model. The voice they use is not one of the voices that OpenAI gives. I think it's a custom voice that they use. It's a little raspy. It's pretty interesting that they gave it something. And Roy, to your point before, where I gotta wonder how deep the integration goes. Do they use just the API, or did they have a fine tune on top of the ability of this robot to actually perform tasks?
The official confirmation of somebody was asking, hey, are you guys using GPT-4 or maybe a new model or something? And then the CEO of Figure, he just cryptically replied saying, we're using some new advanced features, something like that.
Yeah, they're definitely getting advanced features. We know that OpenAI gives advanced features to friends. So Spotify, for example, uses OpenAI voice cloning tech for converting Lex to Spanish. And we know that for a fact that they give out this very sparingly. So probably they have more advanced features. All right, in the hardware and robotics things, we want to cover two more things super quick. Cerebras announced their largest and fastest AI chip on Earth. Cerebras is a company that builds custom hardware, and they announced the CS3, which they claim that could technically claim, and now all these claims are probably still in flux, and I don't know if this supports any how should I say PyTorch, for example, but they claim that it can train up to 24 trillion parameter models on a single device. They say the world has never seen AI at this scale, and it's insane. 24 trillion parameters for a single device is insane. It has 4 trillion transistors. I can keep saying numbers, and I'm not a numbers guy, so when people talk numbers at me, they blow past, but 900,000 AI cores on this chip, and it's very interesting that they have terabytes of external memory, even up to petabytes, which is crazy. Anybody who's more into hardware want to comment real quick of what Cerebras announced and how important this is to the industry? I'm more than welcome.
Yeah, the on-chip memory, which is pretty much equivalent to cache in a GPU, they have, I want to say it's 40 or 50 gigabytes on the CS3, which that pretty much means you would be able to train or inference theoretically anything mixed rule size or smaller at insane speeds. We're talking maybe, I don't know, at least 1,000 tokens a second, probably maybe even 5,000 or more, and that might even be conservative too. There's insane amounts of compute and bandwidth here that you could have, especially for small models.
That's quite incredible. I don't know if like that's in production at some point or when it's gonna be, but at least based on the numbers, this looks just absolutely like a chunk of incredible. And in additional hardware news, just super quick, Anthropic, the folks who are, I think, founded by folks who were in DeepMind before and did some quantum computing stuff. I think that's what Guillaume's background is. They announced their TPU, or like at least what they're going to build or thinking about building, which is not a tensor processing unit like TPU from Google. It's a thermodynamic processing unit. It's basically a teasing at this point. I don't think they have hardware ready to go, or at least not that I understand. And I'll add this to the show notes. I had to dig deep into trying to understand what is it that they announced. It was really hard for me. And it didn't seem like my non-hardware background was the reason. It felt like some other folks also getting a little bit lost in what they actually talked about. LDJ, if you want to take a stab at giving us like a little brief recap, I would really appreciate it, because I know that you were in some of these spaces. But thermodynamic is like a new approach to basically doing AI, as far as I understood.
Sure, yeah. So yeah, there's a Q&A that they held yesterday, which I think it's recorded, and maybe FJ's also Anthropic page. It might be there for if anybody to listen to. But I spoke with them a bit, and CEO and Trevor, the CTO, they're both creators of TensorFlow Quantum when they worked at Google. And they didn't work at DeepMind, but they actually worked on something arguably a little cooler than DeepMind, actually, depending on who you ask, called a Google X, which is pretty much the secret development division of Google, where they work on very long-term deep technology projects. And yes, Trevor and Guillaume, they met at Google X when they were working on TensorFlow Quantum and a lot of quantum computing technologies. And a lot of the systems that they had to develop to mitigate like all the errors that built up in the quantum computing system that they had to account for, they ended up on a path where, hey, we could actually start using this technology itself for the computing in the first place. And the goal is really just general like speed up of mainly like things like gradient descent and operations that are pretty much used in all of deep learning and all of AI. So it's not just specific to transformers or just specific to this and that. And yeah, they plan to have a bunch of server grade chips like within the next, let's say, around 3 years or so. And they plan to have consumer available chips as well in accelerator form factors. So you'd be able to just plug it into your motherboard, just like you plug in a GPU into your motherboard today. And it would just be an accelerator card that has this thermodynamic computing components within it that would be able to accelerate your AI workloads just way more.
That's incredible. I think they wanted to call this the transistor of the AI era, which transistor is like a big step function change in the world of computing. So shout out to them. It still looks like it's a little bit ways out, but definitely they're getting interest. And then the very techno-positive outlook or techno-optimist outlook is definitely also helpful. So I think that's mostly it on the hardware news and robotics. We don't usually often cover, but this week seemed to have been a very big week in the hardware news and robotics, and a lot of stuff happened that pertaining to kind of like tech optimism. A very big week for announcements and different things. The chip design for whatever they're doing looks crazy as well. So definitely folks who are into this, go check it out and let us know what you think in comments as well. I think we've been at this for almost an hour and something, and I do want to do like a little reset, maybe drink a little bit. So let's do a short reset of the space, and I'll talk about some stuff that happens in weights and biases, and then we're going to continue talking. We still have to talk about Devin. So a little brief reset, and then we're going to pick up. Not this. All right, you are on ThursdAI. Today is Pi Day, March 14th, and this day started crazy and kept getting crazier. So today morning, early on, many folks woke up to see SpaceX launch the largest man-made object ever to break through the atmosphere, and this was a crazy thing. The third thing they tried this year also is the birthday or anniversary of GPT4 that was released a year ago exactly on Pi Day, March 14th. And we're still waiting for some breaking news to come through, and hopefully they release something. There were rumors that GPT-5 is coming up. There were Microsoft Copilot pages said, hey, you can get access to GPT-4 and GPT-5. For real, you saw this, right? And then those rumors were discarded, and they said, Microsoft said it was a typo. And we're going to try and see what else, what else we're going to get here today in breaking news. But also today is an anniversary of Anthropic's Claude, the first kind of production model that they released, the Anthropic released, was also a year ago. And very big week last year, very big week this year as well. And of course, it's also ThursdAI BirthdAI. It's a 1 year anniversary of these spaces, as I've been at least hosting them for the past year. Consistently, I think we missed one. I think I was really sick and I missed one. I still sent the newsletter, but I missed the space. And so we're here celebrating the ThursdAI BirthdAI with a bunch of friends here on stage. And I think in this vein, it's now a good time for me to say that ThursdAI is not sponsored. If you want to support this, please support us. Please follow ThursdAI, the newsletter. And if you want to engage with us on socials, that definitely helps, because sometimes the reach is not, how should I say, is hidden on X for some reasons. We've seen better and worse times. So definitely, if you want to follow us and give us a follow to the main account, but also like retweet when we start the space, that will be super, super helpful. But the space is not hosted, is not sponsored, besides Weights and Biases. And so I think I maybe tell you a little bit how I joined Weights and Biases, because this was also a thing. So folks remember me joining the spaces and thinking about, hey, this is fun to do. I have no idea how I'm going to make money. Back then, one of the reasons to do these spaces was to promote my startup called Targum. At some point, Weights and Biases folks reached out and said, hey, let us sponsor your newsletter and podcast, because the audience that you draw and the audience that we're looking at is very similar. And I was really apprehensive in the beginning. I didn't really want to take sponsorships, as you guys may have liked the authenticity of the excitement and the stuff that we talked about. We never get like paid gigs. Nobody pays to come and push their stuff on ThursdAI, which I think the community appreciates. And so I was really thinking about, okay, if this is the right thing. And then after a while, Weights and Biases, I was entertaining this because they really have a good stand with the open source community as well. Their main product is free for personal use, and many folks in the audience that know and love Weights and Biases way before I even knew what they are gave me kind of the thumbs up. And then Weights and Biases reached out again and said, hey, Alex, why don't you and ThursdAI join Weights and Biases, and you just keep doing this in addition to being an AI evangelist or promoting our products and our different products, by the way. We have some new announcements very soon that I'm very excited about. And I, back then, really started needing the money, and the startup wasn't taking off. And so I said, hell yes, this sounds like an amazing opportunity for me to keep doing this, to keep talking about AI with you folks, learning myself, learning from folks on stage here who know way more than me, and then also learning in public so other folks also follow up. And yeah, that's how I joined Weights and Biases. And now ThursdAI is... The podcast and the newsletter are offered by Weights and Biases. The space is, I talk about Weights and Biases stuff, but I talk about the stuff that actually very excite me very much. And so in the vein of those stuff, I just wanted to add that I'm going to San Francisco in a month, and when it's me and everybody else in Weights and Biases, because our annual conference called Fully Connected it's going to be in April 18th in San Francisco, and the tickets are still early bird. So up until end of this month, the tickets, you can get them for 50% off. And it's an opportunity to get, how should I say this? One of the reasons why I joined Weights and Biases is because everybody's a customer, including OpenAI, and GPT4 was trained with Weights and Biases, but also pretty much every other foundational lab that builds foundational models, and in robotics and different other places. Just the amount of logos that our customers Weights and Biases just beats any other company I've ever worked at or even looked at. It's crazy. And so many of these folks will come to this conference to also talk about what they're building, the models. So a very good opportunity to visit San Francisco and join us. A day before this conference, I'm going to do a workshop. And me, along with my team, the Growth ML team in Weights and Biases, we're going to do a workshop about improving your production step by step. And it's going to be super cool. We're going to talk about evaluations. We're going to talk about different other things that we know from the enterprise community, that folks who actually use AI in production, they talk to us. We have our own AI that we're running called OneBot that you're more than welcome to use. So definitely come and meet us in San Francisco in April, or in London in May, by the way. If you're Europe-based, we have the same kind of conference in London, which I probably won't be attending in London, but you never know. Maybe I'll get called. With this, I think we're moving towards, let's talk about agents. And I think this week was a big thing for agents. Don't you guys think? Who saw the Devin announcements? I'm just going to do like this. Yeah. Nissan, what do you think?
Who didn't?
Who didn't, right? Like they exploded into everybody's feed, I think faster than AutoGPT a year ago or something. And so let's basically do a brief cover of the Devin announcement, and then we'll talk about what it actually means. And then I think I'll open up the space for the first time in a month or in a year to actually talk with people who are in the audience and want to come up and tell us about their experiences with Cognition Labs, a fairly new company, looks like funded fully, released Devin, their what they call the first fully autonomous AI software engineer. And we've seen these claims before, and some of us are very skeptical because these demos are incredible, and then when you actually get to use them, the model loses context, etc. And they claim they're setting a new standard on the software engineer bench coding benchmark, SWE bench coding benchmark, which I think they're outperforming GPT4 and outperforming Claude, outperforming all these things, and getting around 18% on SWE bench, which is a specific task for not only writing pieces of code, but also performing tasks. They claim it's operating as a highly capable teammate, capable of working alongside human engineers, independently tackling tasks for their review. So one of the things that caught me by fairly surprised is that compared to something like AutoGPT before or other agents that we saw, and we've talked with multiple agent folks on the pod. We've talked with Joao from Crew AI that's been like in the open source community being very highlighted recently. We've talked with Killian from AutoGPT. We've talked with a bunch of agent folks. This Devin has, besides the company and the investment and everything, the UI is very polished. The UI is actually a set of tools, and I asked a few folks with access to Devin. So if you have access to Devin, please DM me and come up and talk about this. If you're listening to this, the UI has access to a shell. So you can see a shell, like a terminal that the UI has, probably access to a virtual machine as well. It has a browser that you as a user can see, and Devin as an AI agent can use the browser. So for example, you can log in and have authenticated sessions for different things that then Devin can use this browser. The UI has access to a code editor, basically, that you can see that Devin writes things in, and you have access to a chat. And I think that the combination of 4 of these things in the UI, plus the ability to scroll back and follow Devin in real time, but also scroll back to see something that Devin did a few steps before, I think is very powerful, and I still haven't seen anything like this. I think for many people, this broke the kind of the threshold of something that's useful. Pharrell, go ahead. You have your hand up.
Devin's very impressive, but of course it's not open source. I posted on top here an open source version of Devin called MetaGPT, which self-reports to be better than Devin. It's up to, like, we need to do evaluations to find out. But also there's several open source communities that have formed. We're talking about a group with dozen folks, another group with hundreds of people who are all coordinating to replicate Devin in open source. I think actually one of the people here is Jun Yang in the audience that I'm seeing here, who is trying to also replicate open source Devin. So maybe if you want to bring him up to discuss that. But yeah, in general, I think Devin is impressive. But what's the most interesting insight is potentially the fact that this is just a GPT-4 wrapper, and they've just managed to squeeze so much more out of GPT-4 than we have been able to. Definitely a lot of interesting things to come based on just knowing that this is possible.
What you said, Pharrell, is very similar to when ChatGPT came out, and this was quote unquote just a UI, right? There was no technological breakthrough necessarily in ChatGPT's release, but the fact that it was like nicely packaged, the fact that they kept sending back and forth messages to keep the state for you, the memory for you as well, broke the level for many folks who were not like using the API for completion before. Definitely Jun Yang is more than welcome always. LDJ, I'll get to you and then we'll talk with Jun Yang about the kind of the open source. But we also, I do want to cover like the rest of the stuff that got excited folks about Devin. Go ahead. LDJ?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Okay, apparently there was an interview where they were asking the Devin folks about what models is it using or whatever. And apparently they said that they are using they're vague about it, or like maybe the interviewer just didn't get it that well, but they said an LLM with reinforcement learning. And that could just mean like RLHF, but I think they might be talking about like real, like traditional reinforcement learning where you're actually like it's the holy grail of if you have something that's coding and you have it being able to learn and compete against itself and being able to iteratively improve and things like that of complex tasks, like something like that. So that'd be really interesting if that's the case. And it seems like that's what they were maybe alluding to, that they have a custom model that is trained through reinforcement learning.
Yeah. And I think it's very important to also highlight that the UI they built around this and the tools that Devin is able to use, even if it's like a wrapper, the ability of them to promote these kind of tools is very interesting. The browser, to me, is one of the more interesting parts as well, because I know for a fact when I code, I log into a bunch of like services, I read their APIs. Some of their APIs and keys and everything are only locked behind a login wall, for example. And so for something like an AutoGPT or even Cursor, right? So I know that I and some other folks, we use Cursor for coding as well. Cursor has some agentic properties. You can ask it about your code, even edits your code inside your code editor. And then it's able to perform some of these like meta tasks, like figure out what's the problem, go and search or something. And the ability of Devin to do this, I saw one video where like it decided to change the code to add debugger statements and then get a better handle on what the actual issue is and then perform something. And should I say, the big problem with something like, let me add slow as well. The big problem with something like AutoGPT before was getting lost in context, getting lost in the more tasks it executes. I saw enough videos of folks who are not shills of Devin, for example. They are happy to promote the fact that they got early access, but they're not paid probably by Devin folks, by Cognition Lab folks. Enough demos of them recording continuously for 20 plus 30 minutes where Devin actually executes stuff based on the plan 20 minutes in. And I personally haven't seen this from a lot of other agents as well. So I do want to acknowledge Justin Junyang on the stage, the member of the technical team in Quen. The Quen Team Go, I think, is in profile. Hey, Justin, how are you? Thanks for joining ThursdAI BirthdAI.
Yeah, hi, Alex. Thanks for bringing me in. Yeah, I'm a member of the Quen team. Now, I just recently met Devin. This is very impressive. And we're just talking about maybe it is related to code large language model. Actually, we are doing something about it. So we just raise Twitter, just say, hey, anybody is interested. I don't know. It is really hot. There are a lot of people who are joining us, hoping to reproduce the open source Devin. We still don't have a clear roadmap, but for now, for the model, we may think about maybe for the first step, we still use something like a closed source model like GPT4. Admittedly, even like Quen 1.5 is not enough for such complex tasks. I have some rumor that Devin might be built upon GPT4 with a very good prompt engineering. I don't know if this is true yet, but we may start from this to build something like a demo. And for another part, and for the model, we may build something like code large language model, and especially it is adapted to very long context, so it can probably browse the web pages, crawl the contents, and then based on the contents, and then write some code and do something complex. Yeah, this is generally some initial ideas, and we still need some time to think about what to exactly do next. Yeah.
So I would, so first of all, folks, follow Junyang in this effort and definitely hear more from the open sourcing. I think, like Pharrell said, one of the best things when something like this comes out, it gives it like a fairly clear roadmap for folks to try and replicate. And I think the roadmap should include the UI itself. The browsing UI is very, I think, important. The integrated shell is important, at least for the ability of you interacting with this. One thing that I also noticed for Devin is that you could actually talk with it while it performs other tasks. So like you can with an actual software engineer that works on your team, you can chat with the person while it performs like other tasks. I'm not sure how they necessarily achieve this, but it's very interesting where like it probably executes in several steps. They definitely built something there that's not only code execution. I think Nistan, go ahead.
100 years ago, my grandmother got automated. The machine was called It was actually called A Chain of Cards Machine by Basile Bouchon. And that went on to become the Jacquard loom. And my grandmother's knitting now became 10,000 times faster. So that was 10,000x of grandma's. AGI is only 1x. And this thing you guys are talking about is 0.1x. I don't know.
Is your grandmother 300 years old?
The Jacquard machine is 300 years old. Yeah, it was first like in 1725. No bullshit. No, I'm for real. And that actually used like punch card. It was called Chain of Cards. That's the real name of it. This not chain of thought, chain of cards. It's the same thing. It's just instruction following chain of cards machine, and it made stuff close 10,000 times faster than my grandma could. Now that didn't stop my grandma from knitting. I don't know why people are freaking the heck out that now this thing can do 13.2% of GitHub issues. I am freaking out that with all of this automation, smartest freaking Olympiad kids in the world, I rank, let's leave that alone. And like we can barely, and we still have to do the other 87% of the work. I don't know why people are freaking the heck. Yeah. They said the same thing for people with Excel. It's all the programmers or analysts, whatever the heck they were called back then. It's going to automate them. Did it automate? Yeah, it automated them. Has the need for them improved? Yeah. The same thing for Copilot came out 2 years ago. We've been using these tools for 2 years. You still can't find a good JavaScript dev to hire. People are freaking the fuck out, man.
So let's actually talk about this.
Don't freak out. Learn the code. Don't be dumb.
At least some of the conversation,
learn the thing.
Nistan, at least some of the conversations is just like thread boys hyping up things. Oh, this software engineer is dead, whatever. They will always keep doing this. They're engaging the algorithm on X rather than providing some value. But there's definitely folks that I saw, they're replying to like major folks and, hey, I'm about to learn coding. Should I even learn coding? Because to them, when somebody doesn't know coding, sees something like Devin, they're like, why do I even need to study? In a few years, this will be like way better than me. Even now, it's way better than something like a starting point. And I think the answer to this is that the world just will need more code. Like, it's very interesting that software engineers in general, as a concept, try to automate ourselves out of laziness as much as possible, right? I would spend sometimes days on automating a task I can complete manually for 5 minutes just because I know that I'd be able to do some other stuff faster while this is getting automated. Sometimes it's nerd sniping, but whatever. And then I think that for folks who are in the audience who are like thinking about learning to code, learn to code. The reason is Devin will need your help to figure out what to do next. The outputs of Devin need somebody that knows how to code. Like, none of the folks who got Devin are like marketing people, just completely noobs that just like it worked for them. So you do need the ability to actually run these things productively. And I think learning to code is a very important skill. And if anything, it will give you like a meta skill that you'd be able to do the boring stuff, the more complex stuff, you'd be able to review and achieve more. And I think that's very important. Many of us, how should I say, there are some gatekeepers in the coding community for whom the ability to code is their way, their thing to say, okay, this is how we make money. But for many people in the coding thing is like coding is just a tool to get somewhere. This somewhere is shipping a product, creating, like doing a task, doing some of these things. That's not going to go away. If anything, this is going to go and get that much better. So I saw Slava, you wanted to comment on that, and then Roy.
Yeah, I wanted to add some color to the Devin circumstance where we find ourselves using at least a new approach, what it seems like. GPT-4 has been, let's say, claimed at this moment to be empowered by reinforcement learning. There are now developers who are going down this path. I'll do a shout out for one of them. This is a developer whose name is Rohan. I'll pin his open source project to the top. It's called Llama Gym. Feel free to check this out. This is an agentic framework for using reinforcement learning to essentially fine-tune language models. Now, why would you do this? Because from my experiments with language models, at first you can get away with prompt engineering, but at some point to mimic human-like performance, you do need to fine-tune And so in this circumstance, reinforcement learning has been shown to have incredible progress, especially with companies like DeepMind. And yet we haven't really seen adoption for reinforcement learning within the agentic AI community. But now with tools like Llama Gym, developers can start to bridge the two.
Can you post that to the billboard?
Yes, please post
if
it.
you happen to have a link or a tweet for that.
Absolutely. Roy, go ahead, and afterwards I want to acknowledge Ryan joining us on stage as well.
Yeah, first I just want to give Nissan props for his just incredible rant. I just enjoyed that thoroughly. I actually don't agree with you, Alex. I think that eventually we'll see coding, if not go away, be abstracted enough that it would be closer to English or whatever natural language you're used to using. The reason I'm saying that is that's been the trend so far. We've gone from Jacquard looms to assembler to things that are more and more abstract, and the things that happen with a single line of code in Python or in TypeScript or whatever generic language you choose have so much implementation actually going behind the scenes that you're not even aware of. And people, for some reason, are okay with that. You know what I mean? They're not losing their ever-loving minds. I think that as time goes by, right, these very mechanical operations are going to be needed less and less. But the need to solve problems, to tackle problems, to have motivation and goals, those are still going to be mostly human, but those too may change, right? I think we have to prepare ourselves for two scenarios. One where the need for actual technical capabilities that are specialized, like coding, might be like less and less in demand to actually be effective and to be able to ship products and be able to ship features and whatnot. But also that we're going to get more, the agentic behavior of tools that we use is going to become more and more active and less passive, right? It's not just that you're going to ask your agent to do something for you and then review it, but rather it will preemptively start working for you and solving problems for you and making PRs and doing things of that sort, which kind of changes the way that the division of labor currently is in terms of like how much work do humans drive and how much work do machines drive.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ray, and definitely count on you to not agree with me, and I really appreciate the pushback as well. I want to acknowledge Ryan Carson. Ryan, I did not know that you're a follower of ThursdAI, but I have been following you and Treehouse for a while, so please start with maybe a brief introduction to who you are and what you currently do, and I would love to hear your take about agentic and coders being replaced, given that Treehouse is something that you've previously built, taught tons of people to code.
You bet. Alex, good to be here. Thank you for the invite. It's funny because I was listening to a previous episode of ThursdAI while I was working out this morning. And that's when I knew. I wish I had known about this space earlier because it's just packed with valuable information. There's so much for us to absorb in AI. I'm so thankful for this space. And I literally add it to my calendar now. So I'm hoping to show up more often. So thank you for that. Yeah, I spent a decade of my life. I'm 47, so I spent almost 1 out of every 5 minutes of my life trying to empower people to learn how to code. And at Treehouse, I had the honor of being a part of that. And I think we taught something like 1 million people how to code. And I have a computer science degree, and I think a lot about this. And I think I want to acknowledge and be empathetic towards professional software developers because it is scary and hard to see things appearing that look like they may replace you. That's scary for everybody. And I think what we all agree, we're just seeing a reaction to that. And I think we all know that's an emotional reaction. It's not necessarily logical, but I do want to acknowledge it's just scary for people if they think they're going to lose their job. So that's thing one. The thing two, it's interesting. Like I got a computer science degree, then I was a web developer for a long time. And then I started companies, and then I hired engineers and engineering managers and CTOs, and I didn't code for a long time. And after Treehouse was acquired, I actually went back in and taught myself how to code again. And so I used GPT4 to teach me TypeScript and Next.js, and I shipped a very simple proof of concept. Hey, I just want to build on top of OpenAI's APIs. I just want to understand soup to nuts how this works. And you could say it's the dumbest thing ever. Like, why would you learn how to code again? But I think we all agree, if you know how to code, it gives you this deep understanding of how things actually work, right? And I like to pull on an example here where think about building a house, right? So you could abstract all of that away, But if you actually understand how to saw a piece of wood at a 45-degree angle and then put it together with another piece of wood, and then you build something, it gives you a deep understanding and appreciation for the actual structure. And I think that's what's happening here. And I just would, I actually say, please learn how to code more now than I've ever said in my whole life, because number one, it's easier. Like all you have to do is open any good LLM and say, I don't know how to do this. Please teach me. I'm a super newbie. I don't get any of this stuff. And for once, we can be honest about how much we don't know and not be embarrassed about it. I always say to people, just please learn Python and then start building something, because in the end, it will absolutely make you more powerful. Even if Devin creates all the underlying infrastructure, if you understand what's basically going on, it will make you an even more powerful wielder of that technology. So that's my little speech about why we should all keep coding, Alex.
100%. Ryan, I just want to shout out that I was trying to remember where I know you from, and I visited Future of Web Apps in London like twice.
No way!
And I really remember you from there. Like it was the 2012, I think, 2013.
Oh my God.
I met like a bunch of people. So one of like my first professional career like trips was to London to one of your amazing conferences.
That makes me so happy. I just literally got goosebumps. So,
so in return, it makes me very happy that you're now considered a friend of the pod. Feel free to come back and chime in as well. I want to also, on the topic of what you mentioned, I want to ask Junaid, who's a friend of the pod, my friend, and we run the Denver AI meetups together. Because Junaid, you basically did this thing that Ryan just discussed. And what's your take on Devin and how easier it is to automate now with some of this stuff?
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I am one of those people that started learning to code at the beginning of last year, literally the very beginning of last year. I started with the OpenAI API Quick Start tutorial guide and immediately moved on to trying to build things that I could run on my iPhone. And in less than 2 months from when I first started learning, I launched my first app. Yeah, I'm 15 months in and I see Devin, and it does not in any way, shape, or form make me think, oh, shouldn't have done that this last 15 months. No way. It's another tool that is going to be that much more useful for me to be able to take ideas and actually make them happen. And honestly, having built pretty much all my stuff, like using ChatGPT as my junior developer, yeah, this is awesome. You know how much less copying and pasting I'm going to have to do? So yeah, I think it's fantastic. And I think that anybody who's on the fence or worried about whether they should learn to code, the answer is more yes now than it was before Devin came out. 100%. That's my take.
100%. Ryan, go ahead, and then we got Slava again, I think.
Junaid, wasn't it the most magical moment when you shipped that code and it worked?
Yeah, absolutely. When I first went through the OpenAI guide and first got it's just like a little naming thing. How do you name your pet using the API? That was awesome. But man, the real kick was when my first app actually got approved and went live. And I remember standing in my kitchen and doing like the dance of joy. Whoa, oh my God, I'm on the App Store. Wild. It's such a rush. And
congrats.
And for sure, the things that I've built so far are not like, hey, I'm not changing industries out here. I'm not like whatever, but I can build things. I can use these tools more and more to build more and more things and build better and better things. And yeah, only up. It's only going to go up.
Right on. I wanted to acknowledge Anton as well. Anton built the very popular GPT engineer and also is very like deep into CodeGen as well. Welcome, Anton. What's your take on Devin and the renewed interest in agents running code?
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Nice to be here. I think it's super exciting. We've been trying the same approach. We haven't gotten as far and as fast as Devin, but it's always when you've seen something actually get done, you lose this doubt that you have from people telling you like, this is not possible yet. And now when you've seen like more people believe in it, and it's still just a demo, right? It's not a product, but then your focus is just 10x. So it's super exciting times. And I think on this topic of should you learn to code or not, coding is one of the most fun things, but it does depend on what you want to do, what you want to achieve here in life. I think Flo Curello, a friend who invested in our company, he said that all the news headlines should just be AGI is here soon, because that's all that matters. And I think this is a good take on what you do with your life. AGI is here soon, so you should just do whatever makes you enjoy life. So that was a lot of things, but that's my takes. I could dive into the technical details. We did a deep analysis on how they're doing it at Devin compared to the things we tried and how we're doing it right now.
So give me an analysis from the perspective of the tools that they have for Devin. I think for me, definitely one of the main points was how much access it has to different tools like I have as a software engineer. Like I use the browser alongside my code editor, alongside my shell. Let's talk about this a little bit.
Yeah, so I want to do a shout out to Eric in our team. So he built a tool called GPT4. I think he's been working at it for 2 years, and now we're building a GPT engineer together. And there, I think basically all the ways that Devin writes code, like all the tools, are available in GPT4, but GPT4 is just a CLI tool. So the browser, running code, writing code to file, changing code. The biggest, please add if I missed some important tool that Devin has access to here. I'm running on too little sleep right now.
Yeah.
But the biggest difference...
And I think it has access to an actual terminal machine. So I saw that folks are able to run like Llama and actually run inference on it. So that's pretty impressive on its own in terms of infrastructure access.
Yeah, correct. But I think you should, people, if you're curious to run this, you could try GPT-me, run it locally. The biggest difference is that Devin has done significant progress in making the agent stick to its plan and not get lost in confusing itself and not sticking to the plan, which has been like the big failure point for all agents ever since it started early last year. And Devin is better at sticking to a plan. I'm sure it still also gets confused. And it has what we refer to as sub-agents. I guess that's quite self-explanatory what it means. And you have this main agent that says, oh, I should try to achieve this. And then a sub-agent goes into its own path with its own system prompt and so on. They have, I think, as always, devils is in the details in how they've been quite successful there. But yeah, that's a quick summary.
Awesome. Thanks for joining, Anton. And folks, definitely check out Anton's feed and GPT Engineer doing great things there. I want to acknowledge Rohan. Rohan, you were just mentioned by some folks with your Llama Gym. You want to chime in on Devin, how this field moves forward, and tell us about Llama Gym as well?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Alex. Yeah, the idea with Llama Gym is that agents originated in reinforcement learning where they'd learn through interaction, right? They'd receive reward, they'd go around, play around with their environment, they'd explore, and they'd learn. But now in the LLM age, when we have these LLM-based agents, they don't really learn online in this reinforcement learning fashion. So the idea with Llama Gym is to be able to train these agents online with reinforcement learning. And it's a super simple kind of agent class that you just implement a few prompt functions on and then throw it in a traditional OpenAI Gym environment, and it learns, it propagates rewards from reinforcement learning. In terms of code generation stuff, this is actually what I spend most of my time on at Reworked. We do multimodal code generation for generating these web data extractors. In our code generation pipeline, it's not something where we're automating some huge stack of software engineering stuff where you have to go interact with the terminal, Devin, and everything like that. But instead, it's a very specific task of generating a specific function, this structured data extraction function for a specific website. So given some schema and a website, we go pull screenshots of the website, we go pull context from the HTML, and then this goes into this sort of agentic loop where we then generate code to extract that specific data, and that goes straight into production effectively, right? It goes through some human review steps, but it goes straight into production. It's not like it isn't like your co-pilot. It isn't something that you oversee. It is like in production from just those user inputs to code that's executed. I think Devin shows like there's a lot of stuff that you can do just with GPT-4 right now, right? People didn't believe that, GPT-4 agents for code generation were possible. But I think, I saw a tweet that was like, maybe all you need to get AGI is GPT-4 and some IMO gold level prompt engineering, which maybe it's true. A lot of what we're doing, we've done some code fine tunes and whatnot, but a lot of improvement has also come from just putting GPT-4 in better agentic and prompt engineering type of setups.
100%. Thanks for coming up, Rohan. And I just want to acknowledge for folks who on stage, doesn't often happen Thursday. We usually cover the news and then we're at 2 hours already. But I really think that this conversation is important, and I really want to cover this and also open up this stage on ThursdAI BirthdAI to just cover the next iteration of things that are happening, and many people for whom even Copilot is something they don't even use yet. Definitely not Cursor. Cursor is like absolutely the next level of co-piloting to me in my code work, and I use like the Command K every time, and I'm very happy. Besides the one fact that it deleted half my system previously. Those of you who know about this, we'll talk about this separately. But I think it's a very important discussion, specifically because, Ryan, you mentioned something before where we want to acknowledge and want to be compassionate to folks who are feeling this fear about their career, about the general rate of progress that's happening, not only in coding. Coding is one simple thing of this. Writers, for example, they look at ChatGPT, or like professional writers, and they're getting booked less, for sure, because people can now write long things and then review long things as well. And for many other people, seeing something like the figure robot now with OpenAI, that scares them because they learn to, I don't know, watch Terminator. And I think one important piece of ThursdAI that I haven't mentioned yet, and it's very important for me as my kind of AI evangelist position, is to acknowledge that change, very fast change, scares people. And it scares people more than when they don't follow everything and suddenly they see this rate of progress, like, holy shit, this means blah, 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 blah. X and X is like whatever they saw in Black Mirror, which I think ruined many, like a generation ruined of potential of thinking positive about the future. And I think it's very important for us to have a conversation with this, for folks who are building code generation tools, for folks who are writing code, for folks who are learning like Junaid, to actually show that no, it's actually not only fine, it's even better. From the perspective of code specifically, I think there's going to be need for more code around the world, more automation around the world. And if you learn what these outputs can do, then I think you're going to be even more productive. Ryan, you wanted to chime in as well. Feel free to step in, and I'm going to try to pull up one more friend.
You bet. Yeah, thanks for having me up. It's so fascinating to hear about all these agentic systems and what's happening. And I know we all know this is where we're going. And I tweeted out and said, as soon as you have an agent that's basically able to use the internet and a computer like a basic human, there's so many things that you can start to tackle. Researching cures to diseases, planning your trip to your mom's house for the summer. There's just a lot of this, which ideally allows humans to level up and then leverage those tools, right? I'm always a technical optimist though, so that's probably my downfall. Alex, I did want to say thank you for bringing me up. I've got to go. I joined Intel on Monday. I'm helping them build a global AI developer community. So I've got to go to a meeting. But I wanted to pimp your stuff for a second though and say the courses on weights and biases are really good. And as someone who's spent 10 years of my life building courses, everybody should check out the free weights and biases courses. They're awesome.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Ryan, for coming up. And then let's talk about collaborating. Now you joined Intel, the company. Definitely let's do some stuff together. The shout out is well deserved. The team behind the course is the team that I joined, the Growth ML team, and they're amazing. And shout out to them. Everything there is for free, and you can learn from fine tuning a foundational model to extracting better outputs from JSON. And it's all for free for you guys to enjoy. So definitely 1b.me/courses. Definitely check this out. And thank you for everybody who joined so far. I try to keep this conversation going with folks. I also do want to deliver this conversation to the folks who follow ThursdAI on the podcast as well. So if you're not subscribed, definitely subscribe. If you can help, vote with whatever amount of stars, 5 is preferable, on the podcast. I do want to acknowledge that Yam is a frequent co-host, friend of the pod, and Yam, this birthday wouldn't be the same birthday without you. You want to chime in on the coding thing real quick, or on the Devin thing real quick before I do a recap? I would appreciate your things here as well.
First, it's amazing. It's amazing. The demos look amazing. I just want to ask or say that I think that the real test is how reliable is it with real world use of many people. And so if anyone knows, anyone tries, and can share their experience, but out of demos, real life tasks that can be anything.
I try to get folks.
This is your real test.
Yeah, I try to get folks who actually has access to Devin. I reached out to a few. Thursday morning, or at least for some of them, is really hard. But we'll definitely get folks. If not the Devin folks themselves, we'll definitely get folks who have access to Devin, and we're going to try to get access ourselves as well. Definitely Code Agents reimagined excitement about Code Agents is here. I had this poll that I posted on my feed where if AutoGPT came less than a year ago, came out, and it broke pretty much the same level of excitement. Not remotely the same level of execution ability, right? Like it wasn't any tools, etc. Fairly quickly, folks got excited about the demos. Then fairly quickly, folks realized that, Anton said, and some other folks said, it does get lost in the context after executing on a few things. And so there's this ability. Since then, we got an incredible context length with incredible ability in needle in a haystack, and these models working memory grew. So I asked basically on my feed, do you feel from AutoGPT less than a year ago to Devin right now, which I think announced a huge raise from many VCs, do you feel that agents are on the same exponential curve as other LLM stuff that we see in open source, for example? And the answers were pretty much where I am at, where the distance between something like AutoGPT and visual examples of Devin, they don't feel to me that there's been a year of progress compared to the year of progress we saw in everything else in OpenAI, in LLMs, right? But maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I need to play with Devin to actually feel the AGI a little bit. So we'll see after we get access. We're going to give you guys an update as well. And I think it's time for us to conclude the space. It's been a little bit over 2 hours as well. I will just say that before I conclude the space, for the folks who are listening on the podcast, I try to recap everything we've talked about here as well. So that's coming up. If you've missed any part of the show, please stay with us to hear the recap. And I am very happy that we have celebrated ThursdAI BirthdAI with all of you today in the space. It's been a great honor of mine to keep doing this and have many new folks come in to the stage, but also see some folks who we've been hosting and friends of the pod. And I really appreciate my time here with all of you. I'm very happy that this keeps happening, and I'm not going away anytime soon. I think it's time to just say that, again, I really appreciate everybody here. Yam, thank you, dude. Thank you for joining from week to week. Thank you for breaking down papers for us and teaching us teachable moments from your escapades into AI and being the resident machine learning engineer. Nistan, thank you, brother, for holding the space when I can't keep talking as well, and joining and explaining, reading papers together and asking questions and doing a co-hosting with me. Pharrell, thank you for being the staunch supporter of open source everything and as much as possible not believing big companies in their promises and keeping us honest in what we believe and not believe. LDJ, thank you, brother, for joining and explaining difficult concepts where I have no idea how to even explain them. Junyang, I really appreciate the fact that we have foundational model trainers here on stage, parts of ThursdAI. So thank you, Junaid, Justin, and keep giving us amazing Quent stuff. Roy as well, I really appreciate your expertise and pushing back on everything that I say with not skepticism, but definitely dose of realism. I really appreciate this. Everybody else who are on stage, everybody in the audience, I am floored that this keeps happening week after week, and I definitely am going to be here next week to talk about whatever happens next. I see a lot of faces in the audience that join from week to week. Harrison, definitely give Harrison a follow. His YouTube thing is great. Junaid, who just joined and talked about how he was a noob and learned from GPT4, and now he has multiple apps. And Junaid and I are co-hosting the Denver meetup as well. So if you're in Denver environment, please join us. We're going to meet soon and talk about AI. I see Bo Wang from Gina AI and often join us to talk about embeddings as well. I see Tanishk in the audience from Medark, a very young PhD who I appreciate, also a friend of the pod. I see Abby. I see a bunch of friends here who know about the space way more than I could ever, and the fact that they all join and talk about this is what makes this interesting. So I really appreciate all of you one by one, and everybody in the audience should give all these folks a follow, and we'll see you here next week. Thank you, everyone.